trespasses and faults. Needs no indication, but let us believe on Christ Jesus our Lord. That
the military, there's a position for credit.
okay.
So we'll go ahead and get started. Today we're going to talk about Ahab and Jezebel. This is actually part of a series from Abuna Anthony about confessions of biblical power couples. I'm not sure, I don't remember if this was number 3 or number 4. But we're going to talk about it from a relationship and standpoint. We'll kind of get to that in the end. But there's also many other elements in their characters that we can learn from, and we'll talk about that. But we actually briefly talked about Ahab and Jezebel maybe several months, maybe even last year, when we talked about Elijah. And so we'll talk a little bit, just kind of a brief recap of some of the events in their life and in this period of time. And then a little bit we'll dig into their character and their relationship and what we can learn from them. So just to kind of remember where these guys are, place in history. So about just a little over 1,000 years before Christ, David became the king after Saul. And then in around 991, Solomon was born, and then he becomes king 970 AD. So when we're talking about Ahab, he was actually like the 7th king after Solomon. And so he was about 136 years or so after David. After Solomon. So just to give you a period, an understanding, if you recall the kingdom after Solomon, that was part of David's punishment or consequence for his sin, was that the kingdom would be divided, but after Solomon. So it was divided in the north and the south. And if you recall, the northern kingdom of Israel actually had the majority of the tribes, 10 tribes, and then there were 2 tribes in Judah. So Ahab is in this period of time, okay? And the contemporary prophet was Elijah. And Elijah prophesies mainly in the northern part of the kingdom of Israel. Okay, so who was King Ahab? We learn about him in 1 Kings. So in 1 Kings 16, can someone read this passage for us?
And in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, began Ahab the son of Omri to reign over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. And it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took to wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. And he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel that were before him.
Okay, so in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah. So this is also to give us, a point in time. So again, he was in the north, and Asa was king in the southern kingdom of Judah. So as in his 38th year, then Ahab became king. And he became king, taking it from his father, who died. And actually, Omri was similarly noted that he was evil. Okay, he had been the most evil just until his son took over, in which he became the most evil. So we were in like a progressive state of evil, king after king. Okay, but Ahab was the most evil. Okay, and he reigned for how many years? 22 years. Okay. Very good. So I actually highlighted a couple of things, but are there any of these phrases within this verse or these verses that stand out to you?
The last verse.
The last one.
He pissed God off.
He provoked the Lord more than any other king that was before him. And he did evil evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. So he just took evil to a whole new level. But I actually also undermined as if it had been a light thing. What do you think that means in this verse? As if it had been a light thing. What are they referring to? What else? What happens in
Like
this?
he didn't care. Like,
He didn't care, but like read the rest of that
like
verse.
if he was walking, so,
That he married someone.
That he married someone evil, as if it had been a light thing. He married, he took a wife, Jezebel. Actually, this is really important because Jezebel, I think, is the only wife of a king that's named in all the kings. Like all the kings that were before him and after him. She's called out specifically, okay? And him taking her to be his wife is noted here as if it was a light thing, okay? But as we'll see, it's not a light thing. It was a very profound thing, what he did. Okay, so let's learn about then who was this Queen Jezebel. So she was the daughter of the king of Sidon, and it's noted here, and I have some of these citations. We won't read all of them, but these areas, like where she was from, was noted for for idol worship, and she was like very much entrenched into idol worship, and it was part of her heritage and her culture and her practices, and she was very devout in her idolatry. And she worshipped both of these gods, Baal and Ashereth. And so Baal was a nature god, and who's believed to control fertility and agriculture. And then Ashereth was the mother and companion of Baal, and actually, this is a lot of the sexual immorality that is associated with Jezebel, is because of this pagan idol. So Ahab took her to be his queen, as if it were a light thing, in direct opposition to the will of God. And so we read in Deuteronomy. Can someone read for us these two verses?
Nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son, for they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods.
So what was the warning that Moses gave?
they will take your sons away,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much.
Okay, and he specifically says, do not marry these women who go after false gods, because they will turn your hearts away. They will turn your sons away and from following me to serve other gods. But did Ahab take this warning? No, he did not heed this warning. He did it as if it was a light thing, like he didn't really give it much thought. Okay, so Ahab was actually a very politically successful king, in the sense that this was actually part of his political strategy. Marrying the daughter of the king of Sidon, that actually strengthened his political power, his alliances in the region. So he was politically savvy, and if we take away the spiritual aspect, he was actually a pretty successful king. In his time, the kingdom flourished. He was politically successful. He was a great warrior. The kingdom, in a non-spiritual sense, was actually flourishing. Okay, but we have very understanding that this kingdom of Israel, they were God's people, and without God, that worldly success and these worldly tactics and strategies would actually be their downfall. This act, what do you say? Go ahead.
I just want to see if I'm remembering the context correctly. Isn't this also the group that Elijah confronts on the mountain?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to talk about a few of those events that happened in Elijah's confrontation. So this was unfortunately, like we said, a progression of evil, right, from kingdom to kingdom. So Solomon, in his old age, actually began to marry pagan wives, and began this unfortunate trend of the kings marrying pagan wives and introducing idolatry worship of these false idols into the Jewish kingdom. So he of course took it to a different level where he even not just burned incense and worshipped, but he actually built altars. So Jezebel led her husband astray as Moses had warned them. She encouraged corrupt worship of false gods and, of course, served, as we discussed, Baal. Ahab actually built an altar in Samaria for Baal and maintained 450 prophets for Baal in the palace. And actually, they persecuted the followers of God. So during this time, the Jewish, the ones who still maintained the right belief and who were prophets of the God of Israel were actually persecuted in this time. And we actually see that even some of the servants who were in Ahab's house, who were still God-fearing, attempted to protect the remnant who still maintained the faith. Can someone read for us this verse in chapter 18?
And Ahab had called Obadiah, who was in charge of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, for so it was while Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord that Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them 50 to a cave and had fed them with bread and water.
So what did Obadiah do?
Protected the real prophets.
The remnant, the 100 that were still remaining, he actually hid them in a cave and would sneak in food and water for them. So this is how, you're talking about the kingdom of Israel after David and Solomon, that those who still followed the true God were persecuted, and idolatry actually prevailed. Okay, so enters Elijah, like you said, so Elijah enters the scene. Can someone read to us the first verse in chapter 17?
And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word.
Okay, so if you guys recall, when we were studying Elijah, this actually was one of the promises of God, that if they walked right, that he would bless the earth and he'd send forth rain and it would be fruitful. And if they walked in evil and abandoned God, that there would be no rain, there would be drought. And so because this is actually the state that Israel had reached, so Elijah actually just walked into the palace and he said, you know what, no rain, and walked out. Okay. So, yeah, no rain. Okay. Okay. So after a period of, and then we know, of course, the story of Elijah, that there was drought everywhere, and even he was in Mount Cherith, his brook dried, and then he went to the widow who had the one son, and we know that story, but just to kind of focus more on Ahab and Jezebel. So for just over 3.5 years, there had been no rain. Okay, so God at that point told Elijah, "Okay, I want you to go back, and we want to bring back rain. I want to turn the people back." So he actually goes to Ahab, and he tells him, and this is the showdown at Mount Carmel, that he is going to basically take on the prophets of Baal and Ashereth. And there's 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of Ashereth. And he says, okay, we're going to offer sacrifices, get these bulls ready, and we're going to see which God wins. Okay, the Baal and Ashereth or the God of Israel. So can someone read for us this verse 38, chapter 18?
Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood and the stones and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. Now when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, The Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God.
Okay. So the prophets, the false prophets, they did their thing, they prayed, all that kind of stuff. Nothing happened, okay? Nothing, no fire, nothing came and consumed the sacrifice. But when Elijah prayed, actually he mocked them. He began to mock them while they were doing that, which made them even more frustrated. But then he prayed, and actually he not only offered, but he covered the altar in water, and he put like a trench of water around the altar. And then when he prayed, the fire came down and consumed. That's what it's saying. It even licked up all the water that was in the trench. So he like made it even harder. Like he made it like you couldn't get fire to consume this. Like I'm gonna wet it, and then the fire is gonna consume. So he essentially taunted them even more. But he really, before this, he was telling the people that, if Baal is God, then worship him, and if the God of Israel is, worship him. But you cannot be double-minded. You cannot walk in both. So he really wanted the people to basically choose a path. And so when this happened, he actually urged the people to rise up. And so they slaughtered all those prophets. Okay? They slaughtered the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Ashereth were slaughtered by the people when those priests, the pagan priests, proved to be false. So Jezebel hears of this. She's not very happy. So can someone read to us this verse?
And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time.
Okay, so how did Jezebel take the news?
Not well.
Not well. Okay.
He's
And
trying to kill her.
She
She's
threatened to kill him.
first. She's like, yeah,
Within 24 hours.
Right.
Wait, I
That's
don't
right.
get what she said at all.
She said, exactly what you did to my prophets, I'm going to do to you by this time tomorrow.
Oh, one of them.
Yeah. So, what did Ahab do?
Went to,
Taunt her?
like,
Was he
like
taunting
vent,
her?
No, he was just letting her know, hey, God, our God is a real God. Here's this false. Just so you know, I executed you guys.
I feel like
Ahab, not
Yeah.
Elijah. Ahab. What did Ahab, what was Ahab's role? Did Ahab say this to Elijah?
No.
No. What did he do?
Oh, to Elijah.
Who did he run to?
his lovely wife.
He ran to his wife. You cannot believe what happened, right?
It's a stressful day at work,
Yeah. And then she's the one who has this profound reaction. And she says,
I'm going to make your life a living
yeah.
hell.
And who's the one who's going to take the lead in punishing Elijah for this? Her.
Crazy.
Okay. So this gives you some insight, and we'll talk obviously a little bit more about the dynamic relationship between Ahab and Elijah. Okay, he ran and told his wife like a child runs to his mom, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna handle this." Okay. All right. So
Sounds like Hillary to me.
yeah. So.
Oh, somebody else over there.
All right, so here's another story. So actually Elijah prays and it rains, and we know he sent his servant, and the seventh time there was no crowd, and there's and there's no cloud, and then he sent his servant again, and he actually he ran up after this confrontation with the prophets. Ahab gets in his chariot and he leaves, and Elijah comes running across his chariot and tells him, it's about to storm and this rain is coming. And it did. And because the people had repented, the people had returned from the worship, and they actually avenged the prophets, and so it had rained. But now let's read this story about Naboth's vineyard, and let's see what happened here. Can someone read to us all of the verses, actually?
And it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, next to the palace of Ahab king of Samaria. So Ahab spoke to Naboth, saying, Give me your vineyard that I may have it for a vegetable garden, because it is near, next to my house. And for it I will give you a vineyard better than it. Or, if it seems good to you, I will give you its worth and money. But Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid that I should give the inheritance of my fathers to you. So Ahab went into his house, sullen and displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he said, I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers. And he lay down on his bed and turned away his face and would eat no food.
Okay. So Ahab, when I was listening to Anthony talk about this, he said, like, you know, each guy, each manly man, still has like one feminine thing they like. Okay, so Ahab liked to garden. Okay, he liked to garden. He liked a nice, beautiful garden, and he was standing outside looking at his beautiful garden, and he loved it very much. And then he looks over, and across the fence, there's a vineyard. Okay, and it's a really nice looking vineyard. He's like, wow, this would make my garden so much better. Okay, so he says, I'm going to go and I'm going to offer this man, the owner of the vineyard, his neighbor, to buy it from him. I either will give him another vineyard or I'll give him money for it. Okay, and to his surprise, Naboth said what? No. Why?
Like his father's inheritance.
It was his inheritance. This was his inheritance, and he was not going to give it to the king. And actually, by the rules, like, even the king couldn't really forcefully take it from him. This legally was his inheritance, and it could not be taken. So he really did have to sell it to him in order for Ahab to get it. So how did Ahab react?
He went to bed.
He cried.
Okay.
He cried.
He cried. Okay, he
He went to
pouted.
bed crying
He
and pouting.
cried.
Yeah.
Yeah, he pouted. He cried. He had like a temper tantrum, and he refused to eat. Okay. Well, thankfully Jezebel comes to the rescue. Okay. It's very likely that his servants, went and told Jezebel, like, the king is really sad and he's not eating his food. So can someone read to us this passage?
But Jezebel his wife came to him and said to him, Why is your spirit so sullen that you eat no food? Then Jezebel his wife said to him, You now exercise authority over Israel. Arise, eat food, and let your heart be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. And she wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters to the elders and the nobles who were dwelling in the city with Naboth. She wrote the letters saying, Proclaim a fast and seat Naboth with high honor among the people, and seat two men scoundrels before him to bear witness against him, saying, You have blasphemed God and the king. Then take him out and stone him, that he may die.
Okay. So what did Jezebel say that she was going to do? First of all, what did she tell him? She said, "Don't worry about it. Just go eat. Okay, go eat and drink. It'll be fine. I'm going to take care of it, like I take care of everything else." And she wrote letters in his name, and she used the king's seal. And she devised a plan. She said, you know what, we're going to go say that this man Naboth blasphemed. He spoke against God. He spoke against the king. Of course, those are punishable by death. She brought, of course, in Israel, you have to have at least 2 witnesses. So she brought 2 false witnesses, and they testified against Naboth, and he was taken, and he was stoned, and he was killed. And then she returned to Ahab and told him, you know what? It's all yours. Go take it. He's gone. He's dead. You can have it now. So this is another encounter that Ahab will have with Elijah. Okay. So nobody else knew that this evil plot happened. Of course, Ahab and Jezebel. Ahab didn't actually even know exactly what Jezebel had done. She just went off and did it. But this didn't fall off God's radar. Okay, God saw it, and God was not going to allow that evil and that to go unnoticed and to go unpunished. So, can someone read to us when Elijah sent again to Ahab?
Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise, go down to meet Ahab, king of Israel, who lives in Samaria. There he is, in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone down to take possession of it. You shall speak to him, saying, Thus says the Lord, have you murdered and also taken possession? And you shall speak to him, saying, Thus says the Lord, in the place where dogs lick the blood of Naboth, dogs shall lick your blood, even yours. And concerning Jezebel, the Lord also spoke, saying, The dogs shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. The dogs shall eat whatever belongs to Ahab and dies in the city, and the birds of the air shall eat whoever dies in the fields.
So what did Elijah say to Ahab?
A horrible death.
You're gonna die a horrible death. And who else is gonna die a horrible
Your
death?
wife.
Your Jezebel. Why is Ahab gonna die a horrible death?
Because he's following his wife.
He let it happen.
It's his responsibility.
Okay, very good.
Man, no fault.
Alright, so we'll actually talk a little bit more about that. Alright, so then as prophesied,
David, you gave me those?
what? Yeah, this is actually very, very similar to when Nathan went to David. Like these sins that we do that we think are hidden are not hidden before God. God sees them, even if nobody else knows what you did and what you planned and what you deceived. So, I really like this, being accountable to God and knowing that God sees everything and the intent of our heart. And the things that we do, even though they may go unnoticed. And so oftentimes when we think that there's evil persisting in the world and why do, bad things happen to good people and where's God and how does justice fit into this? There's a time, there's a day of reckoning for everyone. And so don't think that these things go unnoticed, even if the world doesn't know about it, God knows about it. Okay, so the death of Ahab, can someone read these verses for us in 1 Kings 22?
The battle increased that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot, facing the Syrians, and died at evening. The blood ran out from the wound onto the floor of the chariot. Then, as the sun was going down, a shout went throughout the army, saying, "Every man to his city, and every man to his own country." So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. Then someone washed the chariot at a pool in Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood while the harlots bathed, according to the word of the Lord which he had spoken.
So what happened?
It was
He died in battle, and then his bloody chariot was washed in Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood, just as Elijah had prophesied. Jezebel had an even uglier death. Can someone read for us? Okay, so actually, just a quick background before we read this verse. So after Ahab dies, his son Ahaziah takes the reign, and of course he was also evil, just as evil, if not more evil, than his father. He actually ended up having an accident and dying. Okay, and then his son Jeroboam takes the kingdom from him in succession. And then the prophet Elisha actually tells Jehu to go and fight against Jeroboam and take the kingdom from him. So actually the kingdom was then taken from them. Okay, so Jehu, who has now taken the kingdom from the lineage of Ahab, is going now to deal with Jezebel.
So she's been alive for that long?
She's been alive.
Like for her grandkids?
Right, during her husband's death and her son's death, and then the second son has the kingdom taken from. So can we read this?
And when Jehu had come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she put paint on her eyes and adorned her head. Sorry, there's a glare. Adorned her head and looked through a window. And he looked up at the window and said, "Who is on my side? Who?" So 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out at him. Then he said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses. And he trampled her underfoot. And when he had gone in, he ate and drank. Then he said, "Go now, see to this accursed woman, and bury her, for she was a king's daughter." So they went to bury her, but they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. Therefore they came back and told him, and he said, "This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, on the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel shall be as refuse on the surface of the field, in the plot of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, Here lies Jezebel."
Okay, so now the new king Jehu goes to the palace, and how does Jezebel respond? Weirdly. Okay. She went and put paint on her face. Okay, she went and got made up and adorned her head, and then she went and did what?
Look through.
She sat at the window. Okay, what does that reflect to you? Weirdness, craziness. But what
preparing
else?
for that?
Was she preparing to die?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like pride.
Pride. Okay, she was still the queen. That's, you know, she was above all of this. She wasn't gonna run and hide. She wasn't gonna beg for mercy. She was the queen. She was gonna go sit and wait for him. Like, she's unfazed. So, it goes to show that the pride went with her even to her last moment. So when Jehu stood at the window and said, "Who is with me?" So it was custom for the queen, if she was going to have, you know, like sometimes male servants, that they would be eunuchs like this. So she had 2 eunuchs who were serving her. And when Jehu said, "Who is with me?" what did they do? They tossed her out. They tossed her out. Why do you think they tossed her out? Why did they not hide, like, and protect her?
They
They didn't like her.
They didn't like her. She was awful. She probably was, you know, like the worst boss. She was not getting like boss of the year or any of that stuff. she was horrible. Okay, she was horrible. That was probably like one of the happiest days of their life when they shoved her out of the window. So we can see that they really didn't have. Ahab and Jezebel were not liked by those who were with them. Okay, they were evil, and you can see that even Obadiah, who served in the house, was hiding the prophets of God. And you could see that these 2 eunuchs, they didn't need very much persuasion in order to toss her out of the window. And so exactly like, you know, God had promised, she not only did the dogs lick her blood like Ahab, actually they ate her flesh. Okay, when they came, there was nothing left but her skull and her feet and the palms of her hands. So that's pretty gruesome. That's definitely gruesome. So what was the legacy of Ahab and Jezebel? The daughter, Queen of Judah, she murdered all her grandchildren except Joash so that she could rule. Ahaziah made Israel sin like Jeroboam. He's the one that we said had an accident. He took over from Ahab. And Jehoram ruled after, I may have said that his name wrong earlier, after Ahaziah's death, and followed in the sins of Jeroboam, and he's the one who had the kingdom taken from him. So that was their legacy. Okay, so it was a match made in hell per se, and then like it had lifelong consequences on a kingdom scale. So this is pretty dark. So what are we going to learn from this? Okay, what are we going to benefit, or how are we going to benefit from this? Why are all of these details in the Bible for us? Okay, clearly there's going to be some lessons for us. Okay, so one of the first lessons, I know that we've just discussed this on many different levels. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And we were even talking about in Bible study. What does that mean to be yoked? Okay, when 2 beasts or oxen are together, bound together, to do the work, and how if that's unequal, how that's really dysfunctional. And again, obviously from a marriage perspective, but really from any relationship, your friends, your people that you allow to be in your life, and how those relationships impact you. So be careful of the relationships you choose. So in 2 Corinthians, again, verse 6, can someone read to us the reference?
Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And what accord has Christ with Belial? Or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For you are the temple of the living God.
Okay, so what I wanted to ask is, because this is something where we as Christians, I would say, stumble, or we feel somewhat confused. How are we going to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth and impact those around us, and then also not be unequally yoked? How do you reconcile that in your life? Joe? Did you want to say?
Still thinking.
Thank you. Okay. I feel like you got an idea there. Okay. What do you think? How can we be the salt and the light, but then we're not to be unequally yoked?
So I have this friend at my work, that is her mom's Buddhist and her dad is an atheist, and she's like going through like a really hard time at work, and like no one on her team likes her, and like they're like really bullying her, like it's pretty bad. And she like really like comes to me a lot and was like, you know, I don't know what to do, and like what should I do next, and like she asked me about like everything, and like I've been having Monica and Andrew help me with her a lot, but because I just don't know what to do. But I think like the biggest thing that I got from both of them is like, you like, I have to be there and I have to like listen to her, but I can't become like, I can't make all the decisions for her, and I can't fall into what she's falling into. So like, I can't be helping her step by step, but at the same time I can't like tell her everything she's feeling is okay and like it's fine and you're right, they're all terrible and everything. I have to be like, you know, you have a part to play, they are obviously not treating you right, but like what you're doing is also not right. Like I have to be, or you know, you have to be like firm.
Honest
with what's
and but wise.
Yeah.
Honest but wise.
I think it starts with, fearing the Lord. Just because you're king and queen doesn't mean that there's separate laws. You have to live by the law as well. And they were lawless. I mean, they did what they wanted, not what God wanted them to do. So I think, there's a lot of lessons that can be taken from this. As far as their relationships, they don't, you're right, they weren't match made in heaven. They were actually, he was weak. And he didn't lead his own people. He was, was dragged along by her, and she may have changed him. We don't really know what he would have been without her. So.
No.
I have a thought if you hear it. So one of the things I like about this verse from 2 Corinthians is, and maybe you guys can talk about this, is when you're yoked together, like the two animals are yoked together, there's a direction, there's a purpose, there's a common goal that they're sharing, right? Supposedly, particularly the ox is trying to move forward to plow the field, right? So to balance being the light of the earth and the salt of the earth and the light of the world and not being yoked to other people, think about what the purpose of your relationship to that person is. What is it you're trying to achieve? Are you reaching out to them? Are you being a source of support, or are you trying to take them on a journey with you, or are they trying to take you on a journey with them? That kind of idea. Where is it you're going with this relationship? So I want to say, or ask, is this the only marriage that we're aware of where a God-fearing individual or man marries a pagan woman, or a woman who is not from the heritage of the Israelites?
Jacob and Rachel.
Jacob and, okay,
Jacob
well,
and
she
Rachel.
kind of has, essentially she was, because she did worship pagans, but her lineage was actually, she was his cousin, so, somewhat, they had kind of drifted. What about Ruth? Do you guys remember the story of Ruth? Like the great grandmother of David? Do you remember her? Where was she from? Moab. Okay, she was a
Moabite. Yeah.
That's right. And so what was the difference here? What was the difference between her and Jezebel?
One was evil, one
She was
was
evil.
God-fearing.
Okay, one was evil, one wasn't.
God-fearing.
She was God-fearing. She was searching for God. Okay, so the heart of the individual makes a big difference that you're entering in the relationship with. And are they searching for God? And are you that beacon of light in their life? Are they stronger in their direction, and are you weak where they actually pull you, right? So we saw many instances, and we'll talk about this a little bit, that Ahab was not leading his wife. Like she led him, he did not lead her. And the way of the world is definitely easier to follow. There's no doubt about that, right? It's easier. It's first of all, it's in line very much with our natural instincts, okay? selfishness, whatever, being, worldly, greed, power, all those things are very much in line with the principles of this world. To go against that, to have your spirit war against the flesh is much harder, okay? So it is much easier when you have two unequally yoked people, that the stronger one will pull the weaker one, right? Like if and I think maybe we even talked about this once in Bible study, like if I take like a cow and yoke it with a dog, like who's gonna pull who? Right? So that's the concept, is that we are to be light and we are to be salt, but we're also to know our strengths and our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities, and Marianne mentioned that, like there's limits that I'm willing to do and not do. Were you gonna say something?
Oh yeah, well.
he's kind of like, I'm not sure if he's saying something or not.
I was just gonna say, so like of course we have like these stories and things like that, but just as you were saying, we have today's stories that very much emulate this. So, for example, I have friends back in my home church in Pittsburgh, or I have friends back in my parents' home church in Cleveland, that have been great servants in the church, and then they marry like a nus person, and just hear me out. And so they go into the relationship. They go into the relationship.
I want to know exactly what
They go into the relationship thinking, oh, I'm definitely gonna pull this person in. I'm definitely gonna. Like, this person's gonna be a servant right next to me. Like we're gonna be gung ho for the kingdom of God.
Not a good kind.
And then slowly you see them drifting away. Slowly you see. I thought you were gonna be the next Abun. I thought you were gonna be the next Sasoni. Like what happened here? And then a year later, you never see them at church again, because they feel like they were strong enough to carry the person in, whereas the whole time they were getting dragged out.
Okay. So the concept of missionary dating. Okay, if the person is coming to a relationship with God for God, versus it matters to you, it doesn't really matter to me, so I'll do your thing, that's fine. Because really the goal is the relationship and not God, and then eventually the person who was weak in their faith, it just becomes more in the routine and in the habits of the person who wasn't weak in their faith. But I do think that there is wisdom, and we are to be the light and the salt, and we are to have those relationships and be the beacon, but we do have to be mindful, like when we talk about from a practical standpoint, when you want to reach someone, you invite them, with you and the kind of things that you do that are like, more wholesome and things like that, versus, well, I'm going to go with them because I'm trying to win them over, but they're not willing to come where I am, so I'm going to go where they are, and then you start kind of, you start sliding down that path where, you went to help them, but they actually pulled you in.
It's very interesting. I mean, you do see it today where people that are looking to get married, I mean, identifying as that person that I'm going to seek out, whether it's a guy seeking a young lady, is he's going to seek somebody that's going to make them a power couple, a wealthy couple, a material couple in today's society, versus finding that right person, that right individual that will bring them both closer to God. So I think the approach, that could be a lesson certainly from a relationship standpoint. When you're seeking, which direction are you looking at?
Right. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
It's kind of not what we were just talking about, but why did God allow for like such a like a life for a life type of thing in these types of stories?
Yeah.
Like when did he change and stop doing that?
So we actually studied capital punishment and like what our church thinks of capital punishment, and I have to say I was surprised when I studied it.
Mm-hmm.
But our church actually supports capital punishment, Old Testament and New Testament, not necessarily stop. There are multiple reasons. One is to stop the spread of sin.
Mm-hmm.
There are consequences in this world that for God, eternal life is more important than the consequence here. So that could be an opportunity for those individuals who receive life sentences, and we actually brought certain clips from people who were in jail, like how that was like who were serving death sentences and what that's done for them. But our church is actually not against capital punishment, and even not just Old Testament, New Testament. There's many situations where the consequence was to be cast out of the church or to actually to die.
Okay, you know how there was that one story that was like floating around about the cop that like shot the guy that was like in his own house?
The Dallas
The
cop.
cop.
Yeah. So you know how the brother came to the stand and was like, I actually forgive you, like I don't even want you to go to jail, and like we all like thought it was amazing. So you're saying like that reaction is just as valid as like the mom maybe wanting that person to die?
No, actually, it's not really from our heart wanting the person to, not at all, actually.
Oh, okay.
So the consequence is not a revenge, and we don't have in our church teachings the concept of revenge, or that person should be killed because of revenge. But the concept is that they would be, justice, but also to stop the spread of sin. So if an individual is spreading sin, then but it's definitely not from a revenge standpoint. Actually, forgiveness is in an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's the Old Testament. We actually love our enemies and we pray for those who persecute. So it's not for a revenge standpoint. And that's actually the ideal type of Christian response that we should have.
What type of capital punishment does that church believe in? What
I
form?
don't recall that it went into the
It
book. It was
doesn't
in the
really
book
sound-
that we read with the moral issues.
The church does not dictate what civil
Right, the
law
church-
does.
yeah.
It's whatever is supported in the civil country that uses.
That's interesting.
But it's definitely not from a revenge standpoint. It's definitely
I was gonna
not.
say, it's definitely not stoning.
Yeah, no,
No,
it
it's
is
not.
not, and from a spiritual standpoint, even the person who's condemned to death, still has, forgiveness and repentance and salvation and all of those
And
things.
acceptance and
Yeah.
And they give them a priest and everything,
Right.
final prayer before the final meal.
And remember, and not to muddy the water, but also remember what
Yeah,
Jesus
so
said
that-
about
They have priests
What?
before they go in.
No, right.
okay, now we all have different discussions. We all have different discussions, so we wanna have one discussion. Okay.
forgot what I was gonna say. Just another point for that, not to go off on a tangent, but remember what Jesus said about Judas, that it was better for him not to have been born than to do this, not because Jesus made Judas turn him over or made him hang himself or any of these things, but because Jesus loved Judas and he knew what end he would go to, because he gave in to the despair and he didn't look for salvation, he didn't look for forgiveness, and he knew that this was somebody that was so close to him, but his end would be in a particular way that would not serve his eternal salvation. And that was more important to Jesus than fulfilling the prophecy of having somebody turn him over. So he's saying better for that person never to have been born, so that he wouldn't make these choices and end up where he ended up, versus fulfilling the prophecy.
Yeah, and we know the verse, the wages of sin is death, and actually from the very beginning, when an animal had to die to cover our sin, in order for Adam and Eve to be clothed, we understand that the wages of sin is death. But what's actually more important than our physical death to God is our spiritual death, and that's why He was willing to accept a physical death, so that we do not have a spiritual death. Okay, so the second part, and this is the relationship part that we wanted to look at, is that any marriage outside the design of God has devastating circumstances or consequences. Can someone read to us the verse for the wife?
And the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him."
Okay, so what is the wife's role? A helper. What does that mean?
To support the man whenever he is.
Okay.
That's the
Would you say that Jezebel was a helper?
No.
No, Jezebel was not a helper. So the design of their marriage was flawed, and that's why we saw the devastating consequences. Okay, and then husband, what is the verse? Can someone read that for us?
Husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, with honor to the wife, as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered.
Okay, so how is the husband supposed to treat his wife?
Honor, giving her honor.
Giving her honor as the weaker vessel, and that his prayers may not be hindered, so that he's actually the spiritual lead. Okay, so he's the protector, he's the priest, and he's actually a provider, and not just provider from a financial sense, but from an emotional sense, to honor and to love and to support his wife. Okay, so that is the biblical marriage. So in the story of Ahab and Jezebel, we actually see a very flawed and unfortunately more so predominant these days, where you have a passive husband and a controlling wife. Okay, and I think if you turn on just about any TV show where there's a husband and a wife, she's the brains, she does everything, he's a stupid idiot that she has to censor. And, you know, similar to what Jezebel did when she was like, just go eat and play with your toys, I'm going to handle this. Okay? That's what we're seeing more and more of. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think?
It's like keeping up with
It's real life.
Okay, what do you think? Not without naming any relationships that you're aware of, like directly, but like, what is your experience with that? What do you feel? No one wants to speak. That's fine. I get that. Okay, it's in a relation to him. You know that him, and this is among the he unloads the dishwasher in the wrong place. He dresses the kids and their hair is not right and his shirt's on backwards or whatever it is, and she insults him, and then, you know, she takes it and does it again. All these kind of things just to make him feel that he's inadequate. Okay, and these type of belittling and what sometimes seems as sarcastic jokes is actually a way to continue to control him. Okay, so the belittling wife. Okay, and what's ironic is that many of the men who are passive in their homes are actually leaders everywhere else. Okay, they're leaders in business, they're leaders in their place of work. They lead people, they lead departments, they lead many, but yet they are not leaders at home. And because at home they have this dynamic. Okay? Anyone want to add anything?
Question.
Yes.
It would be just as much of a problem, obviously, if it was reversed, right?
Yeah, I mean, and as we actually talked about the verse for husbands, it wasn't controlling. It was being a compassionate, loving leader. It wasn't being controlling, dominant, belittling. It's actually supposed to honor and love her. So this is wrong for either side, but it's pretty prevalent in the relationship with a passive husband and a controlling wife.
I think anytime you have any kind of imbalance in a relationship, whether it be from the husband or the wife or whatever, it's never it never works out for both, right? So if the man is controlling and demanding and whatnot, then it'll just end up with a different set of problems.
Yeah, I don't know if I actually put that part. Yeah, this is very important because even women who get offended at the term wives submit to your husbands or anything like that, the context here is that we have different roles. And really in Genesis, in the very beginning, God said, I'll make him a helper comparable to him. Okay, not one here, just different roles. Just like each member of your body has a different function in order for your body to operate correctly, to be functional. Okay, they each has a different role. So having different roles doesn't mean one is more and one is less. Okay, actually God said comparable to him. So belittling and demeaning on either side is wrong because you honor them as an equal. You just have different roles for which God created you.
Right, but I still want to emphasize, because that's very important in all of us to understand what was the intent for God's small family, Adam and Eve, in each of our homes, is that God intended for the male to be the leader of the family until the man rises up to that level and takes that leadership role seriously and act in that role seriously. We will continue to have weak families, and we're experiencing it in this current generation. You know, a lot of the issues we have is because the dad is not rising up to the level of picking up the responsibility. And by the same talking, the role of a wife is to lift up her husband, even if he is needing help, not to belittle him, but to support him, to encourage him. Because support and encouragement to lift him up will bring the goodness in him. So I think we need to understand that there is a huge responsibility that we all need to acknowledge in our homes. If we are going to save the next generation, we're gonna have to think very seriously as male. We need to pick up the slack and become really leader in our homes. And as females, we need to be supportive to our male in the house.
Yep, absolutely. And that's
Do you think that's part of?
Go ahead.
When did this flip? Because if you think back to, I don't think that's always been the case. So I think if you talk generations ago, 20s, 30s, 40s, all the way through the 50s, I think that was basically what society, the culture of around the world, not just in the United States. But now, I think with everything, and I'm not picking on women at all.
It's after the feminist movement.
It's the feminist
Right.
movement. It's everything that we're going through right now.
Right, so we don't want to continue to blame something, but we want to grab the things by the bullhorn and say, let's make a change, female and male. Because I think that feminist movement created this illusion that we are equal. And to be honest with you, I don't want to be equal. I really don't.
I disagree. I don't think the feminist movement created the equality movement. They wanted to put women higher than men.
Well, I mean, all men.
Honestly, yes.
I think. I mean, you're touching on something. I mean, equality. I think men and women, they're equal.
Let's try and have just one conversation, please.
Equal in the work. You're saying equal in the workplace or equal in the home?
In the home.
The workplace is a different story.
Yeah.
Right.
These are biblical principles for the family.
Right.
You may have leadership roles who are women, and you have to,
Respect
them
them
and serve in the way,
Yes.
but this is talking about in your home.
Yeah.
And
in
actually,
a marriage relationship.
in a marriage relationship. And this, unfortunately, we're actually seeing the opposite, where men are taking leads in outside of the home, and then they're not leading in the home. And this is outside. And this is part of the attack on the family, right? Because we're seeing multiple attacks on the family, the definition of marriage, the basis of marriage, but also even for those who get married, we're going outside the design of God within the marriage.
Yeah.
Okay, so women in a controlling relationship are quick to take the lead. And actually, Abuna Anthony gave a really funny way of explaining it. He said, when you have a car, you have the responsible seat and you have the fun seat. Okay, so you have the responsible seat, you're driving, you're paying attention, you're watching the mirrors, and then you've got the fun seat, like playing with the radio and turning on the air conditioning. So what happens is women, when the man maybe doesn't jump into that seat right away, you get ahead of him. Or if he's not doing it the way that you think it should be done, then you've taught him to sit in the fun seat, and you're constantly in the responsible seat. And so that's just, you've created that dynamic. I'll get to the men's side, and then we'll talk about how that relationship actually works for both of them. Okay. So for men, a passive husband in this type of relationship relinquishes his authority. Okay? Here, these are all verses that we've taken as an example for Ahab and Jezebel. And again, kind of like Mike said, she told him she's going to take care of it. So she told him to go eat and cheer up. She's going to go get the vineyard for him. And Ahab relinquished his authority. He had the authority. He was the king of Israel, not just the king of his home. He was the king of Israel. in verse 25, it says, "But there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do wickedness in the sight of the Lord, because Jezebel his wife stirred him up." So he allowed her to be the brains of the process. He allowed her to take the lead. He be in the responsible seat. But here's the thing, just because you choose to be in the fun seat and relinquish your responsibility doesn't actually make you any less responsible in the eyes of God. So when we talked before, when Elijah came to him and said, "The dogs will lick your blood," and so Ahab was like, "Well, who are you talking? I didn't do anything. I didn't even know it was being done. You mean Jezebel? You don't mean me." He's like, "No, I mean you. Okay, you are responsible. Whether or not you made the decision, you are the head of your house and you are responsible." So a passive husband who gives up his authority no less gives up his responsibility. He's responsible. He's responsible for the decisions made by his wife. He's responsible for how the image that the children develop. And I think you guys have all heard how we're very happy with the number of women going to college and things like that. And it's corresponding to a decrease or a decline in the number of men going into college and graduating and all those things, because we have emasculated the men. We have men don't need to be taught how to be leaders. That's your natural role. You just need to step into it. But women need to get out of the way and allow you to step into it. So it's both of them. You need to understand your role for which God created you, and women need to understand the role for which God created them. Both equally as important and comparable, as God said. "I will make for him a helper comparable to him." Equal in the eyes of God doesn't mean you have the exact same function. You have a different function. And for the marriage to work in the way that God designed it to be successful, you each need to follow the design that God had. The thing is what I want to say is, every married couple that bashes marriage is not doing it right. I'm not saying they all fit into this assignment, there may be other reasons, but for sure, controlling women are the first to complain that they do everything, that they carry everything, that they're virtually like single moms. They're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, because the helper, the protector, the lead who should be taking it is not. And she's not made to carry that load. She's the weaker vessel. She's overwhelmed. She's not happy here. Taking control is not making her happy. It's all those things that women feel like they're alone in a marriage and carrying and doing everything else, because it's outside God's design. And this man who's passive and who gave up his authority, or who relinquished it, he's the least guy staying at home. He's out with his friends. Who wants to be home with a belittling, controlling wife? Nobody. Okay, so he's almost everywhere other than home. Okay, he's staying longer at work than he needs to, because he doesn't want to go home, because this is not the environment for which God created him to flourish. So this, when we go outside of the design of marriage, is not just for societal function, which it is, and that's actually the design that God created to set the foundation, but it's for the emotional and well-being of both the husband and the wife and their children. Because this is a toxic relationship, and this is outside the will of God. And we fall into it. We're supported to do it. Society is now not only promoting that, but it is actually only displaying it. Practically the only model. Like we said, if you watch any movie or turn on a random TV show, and actually commercials. I don't know if you notice commercials too, but like the guy's an idiot. She has to do it to show you, then it's fun. But it's really not, and it's putting that in our minds that this is an acceptable dynamic of the relationship. And it's actually everyone who doesn't want to get married sees this and doesn't want to be part of it. But God didn't create this. God didn't design this. This is not where we flourish. So
and this is starting earlier and earlier. So like the issue now that we're having, and you guys are a lot closer to it than I am, is that all this talk of microaggression and violence through words and toxic masculinity and all this other stuff that's going on. This is starting at
Teenagers.
Thank God, teenager. I'm talking about like 6, 7-year-olds, first graders. Like, thank God this isn't so much in Texas. But my sister-in-law had her children sent home from school because her son called somebody an idiot or something. I don't know exactly. I mean, he shouldn't have said it, obviously. But I mean, it's kids playing, right? Yeah, just be quiet, you're stupid. Or I don't know what he said exactly. But he got sent home for that, and it was literally on the report. It said microaggression. I'm like, microaggression? There are two kids yelling at each other. Like, what's on earth?
Okay, so that was a lot of information. It's a pretty grim story. It's important for us because there's a lot of lessons for it, for us, for relationships, for marital relationships, and all kinds of dynamics about understanding the design that God created. But I really love that God never leaves us without hope. With any story in the Bible, there's going to always be some hope. So can someone read for us verse 27? This is after Elijah confronts Ahab in Naboth's vineyard.
So it was when Ahab heard those words that he tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his body and fasted and lay in sackcloth and went about mourning. Keep going. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, "See how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the calamity in his days. In the days of his son, I will bring the calamity on his house."
So where's hope here?
He's not going to lose the kingdom. His son will.
His son will, because he did what?
Because he repented and tore his clothes.
He repented and tore his clothes, and this was acceptable. And this was acceptable to God. So God just, he always, even sometimes when we lose hope, God still has hope in us. Okay? He's the God of hope. And every story you're going to find the compassion and the love of God. So we talked about the punishment and the blood and why does it have to be like that. And so, but then what's more important to God than that consequence is that he saw in that glimmer, in the repentance when Ahab heard these words, is that he repented, and God accepted that repentance of Ahab. So, what about Jezebel? Okay, Jezebel. By the way, the way the Hebrew word is spelled the same way as I saw 2 minutes. Okay. So it's spelled the same way as Isabel. This is actually why some of the church fathers don't like us to name our daughters Isabel, because it's actually the same Hebrew spelling as Jezebel. Okay. Anyway, so Jezebel in Revelation. Can someone read to us this quickly? Okay. Juicy, can you read this?
Fire reads on right. These things say to the Son of God, who has eyes like a flame of fire and his feet like fine brass. I know your works, love, service, children, faith, and your patience. And as for your works, the last are more than the first. Nevertheless, I have a few things against you, because you allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, and to teach women and seduce my servants to commit sexual immorality and eat things sacrificed to idols. And I gave her time to repent of her sexual immorality, and she did not repent. Indeed, I will cast her into a sick bed, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation, unless they repent of their deeds. I will kill her children with death, and all the churches shall know that I am he who searches the minds and hearts, and I will give to each one of you according to your works.
And every comma was ignored.
So what is the hope here? What is God even giving Jezebel? We just talked about how wicked, but what is he giving her? Still the opportunity to what? To repent. Okay. God, like we said before, he never asks us why we sin, but he does give us always the opportunity to repent. Okay, and that's really what he's seeking. So this is just a prayer that we can learn to pray for God to remove all the Jezebel likeness in our hearts, in our relationships, in our minds, so that we also can repent. So there's hope that Ahab repented. And even though we didn't see Jezebel repent, but God is willing. He's patient and waiting for Jezebel to repent in our lives.
I don't feel like this prayer is like judging Jezebel. Oh.
So we judge actions. We don't judge people. But this is in Revelation talking about people who had sexual immorality and all those things, or people who have this and that we're struggling with in our life, and giving us hope that we can repent. Yeah, but we judge actions, we don't judge people,
No, I know.
we don't judge their intent.
But this one specifically,
No, she-
God,
She
not
is
be
the
like
symbol,
Jezebel.
she is the symbol of immorality, particularly sexual immorality, deviousness, all those things. The term Jezebel is similar to Babylon. Jezebel, encompasses many of those types of things. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne, that was excellent.